Awesome. I will be starting with costing methods. We'll go into the costing workbench for reference. Get that open in Kinetic. And all of the job costing is in reference to actual costing. So costing methods here, you've got your average, and that method's going to calculate the weighted average of all receipt costs for all parts in the cost group. Costs recalculate every time a receipt transaction is processed. And the application calculates average costs for all parts regardless of their default costing method. You've got FIFO, which is relatively new. It's an abbreviation for first in, first out. That method's going to assume the next quantity to issue or ship from stock is the oldest quantity. So it's going to pull the costs from the oldest quantity, assuming that's the quantity that will be going out. And the application uses that cost value until the entire quantity from the original receipt is consumed. You've got the last costing method, and that method calculates the most recent receipt costs for parts within the group. You've got standard. That method calculates a cost baseline for the part using the cost workbench to define standard costs for each part cost group, and it updates those costs when necessary. And then only in the costing workbench you have the costing method. You use that if you want to default to whatever costing method is on the part record. Do note that if you're using average or last counting and there's a costing mistake, you need to have a record of whatever those shipping costs were. Otherwise, when you recalculate a past costing mistake, it's going to pull the new shipping costs. So if you're ever using last or average, you need to keep records of your shipping costs, or you can run into some issues when you're recalculating costs. Okay. I'm going to go over to the production detail report. This is going to be the main report you use, and I'm going to pull that up through Job Tracker using a closed job so we can take a look at it. We'll give this a moment to load, but you can pull up the production detail report through this overflow menu. We'll print the production detail. So you have a couple options here. You've got a summary only checkbox. That's going to remove your shipping schedule section, shipping activity, raw materials, and operations from the report. You've got the consolidated totals, which will add a section at the end of the report to consolidate all assembly totals within the report. And when you click this, you'll also get the option for subtotal by product group. That will add multiple sections to the bottom of the report, breaking them out by product group. The rest of these are self-explanatory. You can exclude miscellaneous charges. You can print material transactions, material cost breakdown, operation transactions, and so on. The standard for this report is to print profitability information, material transactions, the cost breakdown, and the operation transactions. So I'll print this out. We'll give that a moment to pull up. This report does take a little bit sometimes. Do note that the actual calculations for job costs will not be displayed until the job is closed. Yep, not being patient enough. All right, I'm gonna try to kill that report. See if it'll let me push through another one. Okay, we will swing back for that task, but the breakdown in the production detail report will give you the actual calculations for job costs. It's going to give you efficiency percentages on the operations, on the operation details, and then an overall. And we also, it's going to calculate your burden and all of your earned hours. Oh, here we go. Look at that. All right. So here's the entire production detail report. It'll give you your shipping schedule, your shipping activity, any invoice activity. You're also going to have raw materials and material transactions. And then we'll have our operations here. The efficiency percentage you're seeing for the operations, that calculation is your attained standard divided by your production standard multiplied by 100. And so that'll occur for each set of operations. See, for operation 20, the same calculation is done. On our operation details, we also have this efficiency percentage, and this one is calculated by earned hours divided by the labor hours for that labor transaction. And then your last, and I'll show you down here, this last efficiency percentage for the assembly totals is the calculation that's done is all the earned hours, the sum of all the earned hours divided by the sum of the actual setup and production hours. You'll also have all of your costs listed out down here, and then your job totals, including your actual gross cost net and the percentage. I'm now going to head over to the BOM cost report. And this will be if you're doing costing for an individual part or group. So you have your product groups here, or your parts. I'm going to go off the part that we were just looking at. We'll do the current date for revision, but you can do the past. I'll get that going. Actually, the other part here is you want the indented level report format. So I'll actually close this out. The indented level will give you all your sub-assemblies as well. I don't believe this part has any, but we'll see the indented level for the breakdown. So it'll pull in the part, your rev, and then it's going to pull in all the material costs, labor costs. This raw casting is actually a purchased part, doesn't have any labor cost attached to it. So this is a purchased part needed, and you'll see that there's 2 required for this ADD-200-S part. So this is your BOM cost. You can run this against any individual part for costing. You get an idea of what's going on. The tricky part about this BOM cost report is if you have a subassembly in Epicor, based on a couple options in the engineering workbench, it can change how costs are rolled up. So if you have in the engineering workbench pull as assembly, plan as assembly, and view as assembly, those determine not only how the subassemblies are being pulled, but they also determine how the costs are rolled up, and you'll see that in this report. One of the issues is if you do a pull as assembly and we don't set a cost on the standard part, you're going to see that as a $0 priced item, and the parent item here is going to be incorrect because it'll show that subassembly being $0. So if you're doing pull as assembly, you're definitely have to watch out for if you're costing right and if you have the right dollar amount on your item. And although we're not talking about the monthly processes for finances, we will talk about the capture COS-WIP activity. I'm not going to run this right now, but we will talk through the different features of this. So this is capturing your cost of sales and work in process activities. So keep in mind, you don't want to run it to today. You're going to want to run it to when all of your labor transactions have been completed and you're 100% sure that they're accurate. You're going to want to make sure that payroll's finished and that any supervisors that need to correct time, all of that needs to be accounted for before running this process, as when you do, all of those transactions will be locked. This process is going to calculate the cost of sales for any shipments made from WIP. It calculates costs relieved from WIP, captures landed cost into WIP and credits the landed cost recovery account, calculates your COS and WIP for all job types and costing types, removes closed jobs from WIP, and it's going to allow you with these two options to post to the general ledger all the WIP activity. And we recommend that this process be run weekly. If you wait and run it monthly, it's going to take a very long time for Epicor to process it, and it's going to slow down your system, as this is handling thousands of transactions weekly. One of the big things when you're running this, so as we talked about, change your ending date to a few days before. If you're running it weekly, a few days before the current date. And you are able to run it multiple times if you want to, for a month, if you want to make sure you catch any errant transactions. A report that you can run beforehand is the inventory WIP reconciliation report. It's going to give you all of the transactions that this would be handling, but in a report format, and it's not going to process them. So if you need to get an idea of what's going to be processed, definitely run the inventory WIP reconciliation report beforehand, and that'll give you a better idea. If you're using payroll out of Epicor, wait until payroll is done for the week to make sure any adjustments are complete. Otherwise, make sure whoever's doing payroll, if it's outside, has pushed the info for the labor transactions up to their portal, because this will lock any labor transactions. Typically at month end for financial items, we'd recommend taking a look, potentially running the capture COS WIP activity again, just to clean up anything that might be out there. The other thing is this outdated and the outdated apply date. This will capture everything between 5/25/21 and today, and it's going to give it an apply date of the beginning of the month. If you're running this and you're trying to catch errant transactions, it's totally safe to keep this real far out. It's only going to catch things that, if someone went back and made a record or updated a record, that's what's getting captured here to be closed out. And it's going to give it a date of 9/1/23. But if you're doing it at the end of the month, just set it to the end of the month, those transactions are going to stand out. And during the initial setup and testing, take a look at the review journal to make sure things were posted properly when you're running it. If things are in the review journal, then these activities weren't closing properly. You're going to have to take a look at them, review them, fix them up, and then you can post them again. Okay. At this point, that's all I have. If anybody has questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, just going to give a few more seconds here for anyone that might be typing a question now. Otherwise, that seems to conclude our Lunch and Learn today. Thanks everyone for attending, and we'll see you next week.